welcome to a very special episode of Arcade Cuties. This is part of the Ghouls for Charity event, so we've been raising money all through the month of October for Trans Lifeline, and been absolutely crushing it as a collective. We were going to do this episode a couple weeks ago, but we've all had some scheduling stuff, so we're going to do it now, and it's going to be awesome.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I'm Faye. Do our friends want to introduce themselves?
I'm Zenny. Am I a variety streamer? Would that be fair to say? The madness of my stream. I make things. I play stuff. Yeah. Hi. Majorly focused on the kind of appraisal and archival of endangered media, obscure media. Yeah. Horror actually ties into that quite a bit, so I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I love that.
Okay. Oh, hi. It's me? Is it me?
Yeah,
it's me.
You.
Hi. It's me. I'm Lyrica. My pronouns are they, she, and I am also a variety streamer. I stream a lot of DBD, a lot of other horror, a lot of indie horror games, and build Legos and scream and do things like that. So it's a great time.
You're the best Huntress streamer of all time.
Oh my god! You can't give me a complex before at least 1 p.m. Okay.
No, I think variety streamer works best. I mean, I pretty much only play Resident Evil 4, but I still call myself a variety streamer, so it's okay. It changes occasionally. There's your variety.
Oh,
exactly.
What's the rule in cussing?
Oh, fucking go for it.
Okay.
It's all good.
Yeah.
You fucking killed me. Watching you play RE4 with those crowd controls.
Oh my gosh.
There's a moment where a make Leon small or whatever popped right when you cracked off a shotgun. So it looked like you shot yourself small, and I was on the floor.
That was so much fun. I need to go back and finish that playthrough, honestly, because it was so chaotic. That was my first time using crowd control, and
I love that.
I immediately I fell in love with it.
Oh yeah.
It took a game that I know front to back and have gone through dozens of times and completely changed it and actually made it scary at parts, which is usually not a thing for me. My sense of danger is broken when it comes to media. I just don't get scared usually, but this was a good way to shake it up for sure.
Yeah. I think the thing is it has to be unexpected. You have to not know what's coming, and that that can break through even weirdos like us who my partner can attest to this. When you're supposed to jump, I don't, and I often am left feeling what's wrong with me? And I'm not proud of it. It's what if I'm really in danger? What am I going to do if some neurological response isn't kicking in? Hopefully that just means I'm gonna be stone cold and just history of violence that shit. But I'm worried I might just be that dog that's too friendly. Oh hey,
no.
What's up?
Can I tell you, that was honestly me the first time I went to a haunted house. My friend brought me. And
love your makeup. You're supposed to yell.
No joke. That was it. Every time someone would pop up, be oh, hi. Oh my gosh, your makeup is so cool right now. Are you kidding me? And then everybody behind me is just can you not? Can you scream or something?
We're trying to shit ourselves. You're kind of style.
Give us some kind of heads up. It's no, I'm here for the theater of it.
Yeah. That's the thing.
Art of it all.
Much. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing that keeps me so enamored with the genre is not that it's a white knuckle experience for me. I just love the theming and the visual language of horror, and I think it's just so rife with ontological potential, just the potential to express meaning through not just shock and disgust, which I think is the upper layer of horror, but atmosphere, tension, trauma, like all sorts of things you can just express and it, yeah. Anyways, we got a whole podcast to talk about that.
For sure. No, I think I usually come at it from like a film perspective because like that's my background, right? And I think in general, horror and sci-fi have like the potential to be groundbreaking more than any other genre because like when you're talking on an executive level, like usually there's not as much risk because like, you know, higher ups are like, oh, they're not going to make a ton of money from this product anyway. So like, who cares if they experiment with it and get weird? And like by opening the door that way, they like lay the groundwork for representation and also just like new ways of telling stories. And like, it's incredible. It is my favorite. Like, honestly, that is why I am so fixated on horror all the time.
Where it took the words right out of my mouth. Like those were literally talking points that I had come prepared to like issue were someone else not to do it. And I'm in good company because that's exactly how I feel. I think it's something that draws me to a lot of the art that I stick with. It is the idea of like it not being marred or in, you know, too closely corporate oversight, like not being as much of a factor is a major drawing the thing that draws me to things like horror, as you'd said, is something that the people who let movies happen already don't have a lot of stake in. It's like, we're not going to be like, it's not going to be getting any awards. Y'all can kind of do whatever you want in your weird little corner, which creates so much space for expression. It's such an unusually free realm of expression in the world of movies and media.
So I want to know, like, what got y'all into horror, either in video games or just like, you know, in general, and like, were you always a person who played scary games, or did you have to like warm yourself up to it?
No, I was very much like an under 10-year-old who fixated on The Shining. For instance, I was that kid. Evil Dead was, I think, what really solidified it for me.
Such a funny movie.
Evil Dead. Like, I love the mixture of like comedy and like, no, this isn't funny. This is bad. This is really bad. But then like also, hey, okay, second, like for instance, second movie in, I guess spoiler for anybody that hasn't seen, but like second movie in, when you're like, okay, I've literally gone through a whole movie of dealing with like the most horrific thing that could ever happen to me in my whole life, and it's still happening. Well, fuck it. Like, I just feel like it mixes them so well together. And like Army of Darkness, I could talk about for, okay.
The Jokerification of Ash Crimson.
So good. And it's being able to freely tell that story, and like especially with that series, they were never setting out to make that movie and have it be this box office hit. They were never setting out to make out this movie to be you know, something that was going to bring in a ton of money. And it's like one of the most beloved horror series out there, to where it had like a phenomenal mini series come back, and so that's what I loved about it. They didn't give a shit. They really didn't give a shit.
Like
they just made what they wanted to make. Yes. Yes.
His work on that film, and I think about like Peter Jackson's work on similarly just genre-tastic movies like Dead Alive, or like I don't know who made this movie, but if y'all haven't heard of Tammy and the T-Rex,
oh my god.
Do your research before wading in, because that movie's kind of nuts. But talking about just like taking risks and not giving a fuck, Tammy and the T-Rex is wild in that regard.
That's so funny.
My entree into horror, what hooked me? I also was I grew up in a household where there were very little boundaries in terms of what I was allowed to have in front of me, like media wise, and I do feel that I benefited from that. I turned out like okay. But like I one of my favorite movies from a fairly early age, as soon as I was able to like catch it, was like The Exorcist. There remains one of my favorite movies. The Shining is also another one of my favorite movies. Like these were early experiences with horror that also kind of set a tone. Another one of my favorite horror movies is a movie called Jacob's Ladder. And I think that is kind of a good... There's a cross-section there because Jacob's Ladder is one of the movies that influenced Silent Hill, which would be my major entree into the realm of horror. And an exemplar really of like the things about horror that I love the most. Atmosphere and exploring interiority, like exploring the motivations of a character in a way that other genres often restrict. The ways that a person's traumas, regrets, like whatever they've buried, resurfacing as like made manifest as like, you know, like real physical threats is something that like is a major part of Silent Hill. I found that and just the atmosphere and the music just so compelling. Akira Yamaoka, who's the composer of Silent Hill's OSTs, the good ones at least, like is a major influence on me as a musician. The visual language of Silent Hill, it's the understated nature of it. I love over the top campy horror for it's the camp that I like about that kind of horror, because I find camp to be far and away like far more honest in art form than like the classiest Oscar bait. I feel like it's just far more honest and human and often more queer. Low art forever is all I have to say in that regard. Silent Hill is just so brimming with atmosphere and it's so understated. The bombast of Resident Evil is largely absent in Silent Hill. And as a lover of both series, I think it says a lot about what I look for in horror that I wound up playing pretty much every Silent Hill game and have had rather minimal experience with Resident Evil, which I'm fixing now. Like I think when I was younger and just kind of a teenage snob, I was like, Silent Hill is the thinking man's Resident Evil, and which is wrong because they have different aspirations. Silent Hill wants to tell a story about like it has different aspirations, different goals. Like RE like wears its B movie influences on its sleeve in a way that I find really endearing, and Silent Hill it has more art house aspirations. Like I really think that like movies like Pulse, a Japanese horror film that really embodies, and maybe this can kind of segue into how horror represents larger societal anxieties. But Pulse is a movie that came out in the late 90s in Japan and really, to me, is kind of a perfect encapsulation of that country's anxieties at the time. They were dealing with a pretty brutal recession after the 80s economic bubble bursting sometime in the early 90s. The 90s for Japan is what they call their lost decade. And there was a lot of economic strife and a lot of just existential anguish. Like people were carrying around like, what was that book that like Nostradamus wrote? Like people in Japan were like literally walking around with copies of that book in their pocket. And I think a lot of people were ruminating on the end times come Y2K because
right.
Don't know how computers work. But for Japan, it was kind of unique and it inspired a lot of art that was very existential, very philosophically wrought and full of ruminations on the end times. You know, Genesis Evangelion comes to mind. Pulse, similarly, goes in that direction by the end of the movie. But up until that point, it is just pure gloom. Like the movie just has such... It is a horror film without any violent murder. There is some violence depicted on screen, but the horror is largely emotional and social. The idea of being isolated and like drawing inward as despair consumes you is really the specter of that movie. Isolation, social isolation, and like anxieties about technology. These are all things that I'm rambling. I don't want to take up too much.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I've been waiting to do this. I'm just so excited. I'm gonna shut up.
Can I tell you that I'm glad you touched on the campiness of Resident Evil, because that is by and large like my biggest complaint against like the Resident Evil fandom when it comes to all of these adaptations, whether it be like the movies or the Netflix TV series, is they're just like, it's not serious enough, it's not sticking to the lore, like it's too silly. Like there's a fucking sewer gator in Resident Evil 2. Like, come on, we're not being that serious. Like, it's fine. It's fine.
I haven't played them yet, and I know that.
And like I adore like action movies where I don't have to think. And Resident Evil in particular, Resident Evil is such a when you're talking about the original movies, is such like a dad series. Like my dad was obsessed with them, and so like we made a tradition of the movies, like the Mila Jovovich, like
sure.
Yes, he was obsessed with those, and so we made a tradition of like every time one would come out, we would watch it in theaters. And like, are those movies great? No, but like at the same time, Paul W.S. Anderson, his biggest takeaway with those movies is that my wife is really hot and she does really cool stunts, and so I'm going to show off both of those in as many ways as I can. Especially if I can use 3D technology. Like, and that's all those movies are, and they're fine because of it.
Oh yeah. So what's there to complain about if the movie's just like, this movie's just hotties kind of being bozos? I'm cool with that. Like, what more could you ask for?
So Lyrica, you mentioned Evil Dead. Have you played the new game or any of the like older? You have. What do you think about it?
I like it. I know a lot of people when it came out, people were like, "Oh, is this gonna like replace Dead by Daylight for you?" It's very different than Dead by Daylight. The mechanics are vastly different, and there's an element of you fighting back that is very not different than definitely not present in DVD. So yeah, I definitely enjoy it. And the same people ask the same thing for the new Ghostbusters game that just came out too, and my answer is the same. It's a very different dynamic of gameplay. So all three of those are definitely in rotation. I was just the happiest little lad when they added the Army of Darkness
with your kind of like English schoolboy, like Dickensian, like you had like little shorts and like suspenders. Like, please, Sam, I have some more.
Right? Where are you going to school, Papa?
You're doing the berries and cream, but it's Army of Darkness, Army of Darkness.
Oh God!
Death, destruction! Hooray!
That's so good. There's supposed to be a new Evil Dead movie coming out this month. The last I saw, they couldn't decide if they wanted to put it in theaters or make it streaming exclusive. I think it's an HBO Max thing. But there's been like no promotion for that movie whatsoever. So like I'm a little nervous.
Seems odd.
I don't know why. Yeah. Well, I mean, the remake of it too, I would say even brought back the feeling of the original like horror aspect of the first movie. It was not light. And I mean, come on. Okay, it's not that Evil Dead is a light series. But if you've seen the movies that come after the first one, you know what I mean about the difference in the tone, right?
The tone.
And so like that it brought it back to that real like, oh God.
I think the staginess of the obvious synthetic nature of the practical effects, and just like frankly to its benefit, the quality of acting, or at least the style of acting,
right,
helps sort of buoy what could otherwise be some kind of heavy content as sort of like, oh, we're okay, this is we're in the fun zone, like it's not really that serious. But the new movie came out at a time when realism and grit and prestige television and TV only being about sad dads hurting people really bad. That was like the kind of the culture of the media at the time. So like that,
and video games. We had a whole sad dad movement.
AAA video games became almost exclusively like prestige television simulators by that point. Just really drab color palettes and angry bearded men just hurting people real bad. I loved it.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. The Evil Dead remake was a lot. Like I was at a comic. The way that I watched it was that I went to a comic book shop that happened to play it, and I looked up
they were
at the
just
TV.
playing it, huh?
They were just playing it, and there's some pretty in extreme gore in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just looking up and seeing somebody just getting absolutely owned, but just demolished real bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got to spend long enough that I don't remember exactly what implement was used, but I just remember thinking like, damn, I'm just trying to buy some Spider-Man comics or something. I'm just looking for some manga.
Not looking to see anybody like punctuate them with a nail gun like over and over again.
Like,
oh my god! And I was thinking like the tone of this is like not that. Where did the camp go? And when you take out the camp, it does sort of give the movie a different tone. Which like the fact that it leaned into it so hard made it feel deliberate enough that I felt like it was a kind of a purposeful, creative deviation from the source material, which I'm all for. Like I'm not on that boomer shit where like if you're remaking it, don't you dare deviate from the source material. You have to follow it to a T. What's the point at that point? Like, just I in general would like to see less remakes, but if you're going to remake things, do something novel with it. Give that remake a reason to exist by, instead of just repeating what's already been done, have a conversation with what's been done. You know what I mean? The way that like FF7R did. Kind of an accomplishment in that regard. It really isn't a Final Fantasy VII remake. It's almost an intentional misdirect that it's called that.
Right. And it's like you touched on earlier, like the products that we make are such a reflection of the time period that they come out of, like from a cultural level to, you know, daily living.
Especially with speculative fiction like sci-fi and introspective fiction like horror.
So you had mentioned Silent Hill and sort of that, you know, psychological, you know, very person-centric storytelling.
Yeah.
Is that the type of horror that you gravitate towards?
I would say so.
Okay.
I think like one example of a piece of horror media that might not fit that description would be 28 Days Later. And movies like Dawn of the Dead and other things are more macro and focused on like societal ills more than interpersonal ills. But yeah, I like dark fiction, horror fiction, whatever you want to call it, that kind of hones in on our innermost anxieties as people, or even just like the spirit of the times. My partner Katie had a class in college, or TA'd for a class in college or something called Our Monsters Ourselves, that delved into the subject of like how horror and how monsters represent the collective fears of an era or any given society. And that's probably one of the most interesting aspects of any horror involving monsters to me.
Have you ever played, what is that one? Is it Perfect Dark? Or no, what is it? It's a GameCube. Oh my gosh, what is it? What is it?
I'm
gonna look it up.
I think I know which one you're talking about. Is it the GameCube Eternal Darkness?
Yes, that's the one. Have you ever played that one?
I know about it. I know that it does some kind of meta textual fourth wall breaking by like making you think that you as the player might be losing your shit, which I think is really cool.
Right. I feel like that would be right up your alley.
I'm sure like it's on my radar for sure. Another piece of media or type of media that like has been a major source of like horror for me that I've gravitated towards is manga. Namely, like you guys might be familiar with the works of Junji Ito. He's a manga artist who is probably the biggest name in horror manga, and rightfully so. He's an amazing artist, and his ideas, like if you're just looking for truly creative horror ideas, just like I didn't know I could be scared of that, check out Junji Ito. He has a story that is so good it's been like memed on so many times. It's called, I'll type the name in chat. It's called The Enigma of the Amigara Fault. And it is a story about a fault, like there being an earthquake and a fault line opening up in Japan that reveals all of these strange holes in the cliffside.
Oh, okay, yes. This is my hole. It was made for me.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's fucked up. And I think about it sometimes, and it makes me feel bad, but it's easily one of my favorite comic strips, one of my favorite manga of like all time. It's so good. And I think like no matter how conceptual or like left field his premises get, the thing that the horror really comes from is the way that he paces his storytelling by making you the agent in like, all right, a perfect example would be he will have the last panel be a person, some horror slowly dawning on somebody. You do not see the horror. You see the reaction, and the way that he illustrates those expressions is so gripping. Like the way that he draws a face that is just drawn with fear, terror, horror, trauma, whatever, is so effective. And then he's like, and you have to turn the page to see what they're seeing. And the fact that he times it that way gives you this sort of agency, and like, it's almost like playing a game. The way that playing a game makes you an active participant as opposed to the passive observer you are when you're watching a movie, which can elicit feelings of helplessness. The fact that you have to subject yourself to whatever lies on the next page is true genius to me.
Right. And you're almost like at that point, like in that moment, leaving it up to the viewer's imagination, which is oftentimes like scarier than anything else.
That's that shit.
Like, yeah, right. The fear of the unknown. Lyrica, is there a type of horror that you were drawn to in games?
I definitely think that games that play more on like a psychological horror aspect tend to elicit more fear out of me than, I mean, like, of course a jump scare, right? Like that's gonna get anybody because you're startled. But as far as like making me think about it beyond, you know, that 2-second jump scare, or making me go, oh, that would be truly terrifying if that happened to me. It either has to come at me from like that psychological aspect, or like paranormal in the sense of a ghost, because this is a thing that I can't necessarily fight back with my hands with, you know, like a monster. Yeah, you're scary, but I'm going to fuck you up.
Yeah. I'm a combo your ass. Catch these hands.
Yeah, exactly. But you're telling me I made the monster up in my mind? Well, fuck.
when in Silent 2, when Laura's, this isn't really a spoiler, but like when Laura was just like, James asks this kid, like, aren't you scared? And she's just straight up like, why should I be? Which is like the first moment in the game that plants the seed that like maybe everything that you're experiencing, witnessing, bearing witness to, is it happening or not? And the fact that you have to wrestle with that, like, as I was playing the game for the first time, I was wondering, like, okay, are there monsters there at all? Is it all in his head? Are they actually people? Am I fucking stoving people with a pipe? Like, what the fuck is going on here? What'd it do, James?
I think that is like a line in one of those games where they're like, oh, they look like monsters to you? Like, and you have to just kind of guess what they look like to the NPCs. Yeah. Like that's very fascinating to me. I think the game that like tickles my brain the most when you're talking about existential dread is Soma.
I need to play that.
It's so good. Essentially, you are a person whose memories and subconscious were uploaded to the cloud, and then that subconscious was placed into a robot like centuries into the future. And so you have to like come to grips with whether or not you are your own existence or you're just like a carbon copy of it. Like, it's very neat. And then the questions that pop up towards the end, I won't spoil it because I think like it's short enough that I would recommend anybody play it.
Identity. Yeah. So I would say that that's another thing that really draws me to a horror thing, is if it focuses on the idea of selfness, selfhood, the identity, the body. Like movies like Moon, and movies like Ghost in the Shell, the original. These are not horror films, but they do tap into a pretty a fairly universal horror of being the highly cognitive animals that we are, and all of the room for like anguish that our high cognition brings us in terms of like ruminating on our existence, being able to actually project out into the future, and like knowing that we die, and pondering over the idea of like what a self even is. I love horror that centers around those things.
So we just had Kate post in the chat. I'm pretty sure it's a quote. It says, "I'm sure the only me is me. Are you sure the only you is you?"
That is from PT.
Yeah.
I gotta stream that soon. I happen to have one of the PS4s that has it. Oh man, yeah, that.
Oh
PT
my
fucking
god!
owns.
If Soups knows that, oh my god!
Do y'all not have a PS4 with PT on it?
No, not anymore. No. Those things are worth a pretty penny nowadays.
Yeah.
I will be the PT benefactor. I am happy to take on that role.
There were a couple of folks who had attempted to like remake it from the ground up. Like
that's the only thing we've been able to get a hold of. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool that people do that, and it's really fucked up that Konami did what they did. I really would have liked to see
that. We were literally discussing that before everybody came together in the chat. I was like, you know what I'm excited for? I'm excited for this horror game that I know Hideo's working on because he said he was working on it. The amount of shitting on that's about to happen because y'all just said, you know what? We don't need you. It's fine. And he said, bet, and picked himself up, picked up his whole crew, and not only developed a massive game, but also an entire studio at the same time. And then 2 years later was like, hey, we're moving to a bigger studio. Y'all should be scared. You should be concerned.
Kojima and the head of Konami had bad blood for a long time, and it's evident in the way that a lot of Hideo's last pieces of work panned out. Mm-hmm. They're all incomplete games because funding would be cut. The deadline would be like they would just like put a hard deadline on things and hold them to it, and it's a shame.
Yeah, I didn't think that this statement would be made in this episode in particular, but fuck turning your IPs into gambling and pachinko machines.
Oh my god.
Oh, it's so disappointing. You mentioned Evangelion earlier, and there was this super cool trailer that dropped for Eva and Shin Godzilla crossover, and people have been waiting for it forever. And so the cinematic trailer dropped, and it's like, oh, are we getting a movie? Are we getting a game? But no, it's just a fucking pachinko machine. And like the collective sigh of disappointment from everybody is just, oh, it's the worst.
I didn't know about that, but man, I'm not surprised. I will like as salty leftist, just like consummate hater of like big business, capitalism in general, the whole pachinko thing, the kind of phenomenon of like microtransactions evolving the way that it had over the past 15 years. Whenever it was that Bethesda was like, we can sell a useless piece of cosmetics to people for like $2, became like the entirety of like video game structure. It's been painful to watch that transformation, which is also why I largely don't feature AAA games on my stream. They make me sad, and they make me like video games less because of those elements. They are exploitative. They rely on people's FOMO. They rely on people's addictive tendencies, and they exploit them. And they make games worse because you have things like freemium, where the promise is that you never have to spend a single cent, but they're going to make it such a cynical grind fest that in order to actually unlock all the content for your character, you might have to play for years. So eventually you're going to buckle, and they're banking on that. And they're making the game worse to push you into making that transaction. And it's so insulting.
It's the irony of Amazon producing a Fallout series for a game series that focuses on like capitalism leading to global destruction. But no, they'll post about get ready for our new TV show. It's like, okay.
I'm just gonna say it. We didn't need it. We didn't need it.
Yeah.
The Fallout TV show. We don't need it.
Last of Us TV show. I thought they already did that. It's called The Last of Us. It came out on PS4. On PS3, really.
Remastered even.
Talk about like Amazon making like a TV show like that, or Square literally becoming Shinra. Like FF7 wears its like anti-capitalist sentiments on its sleeve, and then Square becomes like the preeminent.
Check out our new NFTs.
Oh my god, what a clown. Cringe. Oh my fucking god. That CEO, man. I'm gonna stuff his ass in a locker. I'm gonna bully that fool.
I will say that with horror, the only kind of horror that I don't really gravitate anymore, just because there was such an oversaturation of it, is
I feel like I'm about to agree with you so hard.
Is the what if we're the monsters that kind of like comes from The Walking Dead and The Last of Us, and I just feel like most of the time it's not done particularly well. Like it's such a like inhale what if we're the bad guys, like I don't
Babby's first rumination on humanity.
Right like
there's never that big realization at the end, like I am the monster. Like that's not
it's my struggle with The Last of Us in particular,
let's go, is
that it's just a fucking drag. Like honestly, there is nothing. Like, especially the very first one, like, you're giving me these messages that are very, like, you're putting me down. There's not any hope. It's very bleak and very punishing. And then you have gameplay that, like, is pretty repetitive and, like, not particularly great in the first one. And then the second one is, like, I saw a bunch of interviews that were essentially, Neil Druckmann being like, aren't you ashamed of these depraved acts that we're making you do, but not giving you the choice to like not commit these acts of violence? Like, I don't want to hurt a dog, and like I didn't. If I could have avoided taking an axe to this person's head, I would have done it.
Yeah, you're gonna tut me for the only choice you left me with, you didactic misanthrope.
Right. And then it's
same time, it's literally the end of the world, and you're like, what do you expect? Do you expect these things to not be happening? The world has turned upside down. You're gonna make people feel bad for surviving?
Right.
Yeah. My biggest issue is like, I got so many issues, especially with Last of Us Part 2. It props up like minorities. But the minorities in that game, like I think that the game wants you to interpret it as a story about found family, the cycle of vengeance, all of these things. But it's like I said, Babby's first rumination on humanity,
right?
Babby's first like visiting upon themes of like the cycle of vengeance and how it does no one any good. But also the only image of like social or societal stability that it presents is rooted in this idea of like the nuclear family. So like the whole like concept of like, you've got these the main characters are queer, like we finally made a diversity win, except not really, because they're still holding up this idea of the nuclear family, like the heteronormative like nuclear family as like the nexus of stability in society. And before everything goes all pear-shaped, like when that kind of like structure is infiltrated by an external source, which is also xenophobic, which Neil Druckmann is deeply xenophobic. Like there are so many undercurrents of like Israeli nationalism in that game as well. Not to get too political, but like he's a bigot. And the fact that he has all of these characters that he wants you to care about, but at the end of the day, they're just sock puppets for this misanthrope to, throw around blithely. Right. But he expects you to care and wants you to feel bad because he has something to teach you about humanity. Except he's wrong about people. We're not really as thoroughly hateful and violent as I guess he is. And as go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know you're good. I was just going to say, so Jalen in the chat right now sums up the point that I think we were trying to get to.
Yeah.
In a much more succinct, like So Jalen says, they're super cynical games and hinge on the premise that everyone, including you, are selfish and wouldn't help others around you given the chance. Like,
exactly.
Like that's like perfect summary, honestly. Like, thank you for
Absolutely
for putting the words out there.
Coming to the conclusion about me in your game, a person I've never met in my life, but you somehow have figured it out in your game. Great.
Neil Druckmann is the Joker. He's cringe.
That's really interesting, though. Like, I had no idea that that political undertone was in it, Zenny. I'll have to like look into that afterwards, because
for sure.
It's The Last of Us is a series that, like, yes, it has some merits, but like, I don't know. It's such a slog for me to get through personally that, like, I don't know if I'll ever play the second one.
Oh yeah. Well, if you thought the first one was a slog, maybe steer clear of the second one.
Yeah.
As with so many pieces of media that purports to be to have queer representation, it just falls flat for me.
Yeah, it feels like it was very much just stuck in there, for the sake of being there.
Right, just friendly reminder: you're allowed to like stuff, but we can also be critical and like really do deep dives on the problematic nature of stuff. Both can coexist.
Critique is not attack.
And I mean, like, and if you like the game, I go for it. Play it, please. If it means something to you, then that's important. Right. It's just, these are the reasons why I personally have not been able to get into it and play it.
Because, like, the heartfelt stuff is really good. Like, yeah, I like the giraffe scene. That's very sweet. But, like, was it worth getting to that point? Come back to me in, like, a couple weeks and let me think about that. That's why, like, I tend to gravitate so much more towards the camp of horror and the ridiculousness of it. Resident Evil 4 was like my first foray into the horror genre and into Resident Evil outside of the movies. My buddy Jerry, like, we were in high school and he was just like, hey, this is my favorite game. Like, you should play it. And just in the cafeteria, handed me his copy of Resident Evil 4.
Damn.
And if you've never played that game, like, it just throws you in. Like, the mechanics are super clunky because it's like not quite third person. Like, there's still that element of tank controls to it. And it doesn't tell you like how to shoot or anything until you're maybe 20 minutes in. Like, you have to figure it out. And so, like,
man, that makes me miss when games used to trust players.
The first time I tried to play it, like, I got into it and I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if this is going to be the game for me. And he was like, just stick it out for like 45 minutes. And sure enough, like, that game kickstarted so much for me. And that game is ridiculous. Like,
oh my God. But it's great. It's wonderful. That was my first Resident Evil game. And just as a bit of background, I grew up very opposite to Zenny in that I had very many boundaries around what I could consume and watch growing up in a very strict Pentecostal Christian household. I mean, like, they took my Fantasia VHS and taped over it with Pocahontas because Mickey was a sorcerer. Like that level. We didn't celebrate Halloween.
Just whitewashing of colonialism is better than a mouse wizard.
Yes.
I like that it wasn't even Chernobog, like the fucking demon that was the thing that was like the no-go for them. It's the mouse that can make brooms dance. Wow.
Yeah.
Clearly the work of Satan.
The threat of a clean floor. So a little bit of background there. This was the first game that I remember one of my friends getting. Went over to their house. It was, those days where, like, you would call and your friend was like, hey, I got this new game. And you're like, I'll be right there. Run on over and I get to play it over there because, their parents had reasonable boundaries. And I remember them being like, hey, you want to finish it. And they were just like, here, just take it home. And I was like, okay. And, I don't know what possessed my child mind to be like, yeah, let's play this in the living room. But I did. And I specifically remember a part where there is a person standing with, I think, a ram head. And my mother walked in and she said,
It's just a fancy hat.
You turn that off and get Satan out of my house right now. And I just remember thinking, this is the coolest fucking shit I have ever played. And yeah, maybe that's why I gravitate towards any games that deal with like cult. And like religious horror. High religious trauma, baby. I love it. I love it. And so that game was like, yes, that game was the game where I was like, I don't care. I'm going to finish this game and then I'm going to grow up and then I'm going to play even scarier games.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to attribute so much of my love of horror in gaming to Capcom specifically, like, because they have so much skin in the game. Like, Resident Evil,
Haunting
iconic.
Grounds.
Like, yeah, the first Dead Rising, I had a friend who invited me over because he had just gotten Dead Rising, and because I think it was a launch title for the 360. And so he let me spend the night. One of the things that they didn't consider, because the 360 was like the first HD console, right? Is that many folks wouldn't have HD TVs. And so if you were running composite with the 360 and Dead Rising, like the text was almost illegible because it was small and blurry.
Yeah.
And so I remember like playing very little of Dead Rising and you know, just kind of watching my friend go until he died. But like that's also such a formative experience for me. It's just like watching this dude run around a mall and like put on silly hats and
far less horror, more sandbox, but still playing in the aesthetic trappings of horror, but inviting them to just kind of have a ball, which is really cool.
And then you've got, you know, even more outlandish like Devil May Cry, which is its own thing. Like
that's my shit right there. Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Guilty Gear. These are all games that dabble in the aesthetic trappings of horror while inviting you to be the empowered one.
Yeah.
Which like I guess I already said the word, but there's something so empowering about embodying this figure that these monsters that in so many other works of horror fiction are the kind of the untouchable threat, like the unbeatable threat, suddenly are no match for you.
Right.
I think is that subversion of theme while retaining the aesthetic trappings, like embodying the thing that is actually the horror's horror, is something that's really compelling to me from just a power fantasy standpoint and an empowerment standpoint. Not to mention, those games are gay. Like, Bayonetta is like the gayest. You literally like kill angels, you vogue angels to death. It's so cool.
My bodysuit is my hair.
Yeah. You literally slay in every sense of the word.
That's actually like the perfect transition, because I am, you know, given the context of the show, I am very curious. How does horror in gaming, or just in general, you know, how does that relate to your queer experience?
Okay, so like the less deep read on like my attachment to horror in relation to my queerness would be character design and like just the games that we just were talking about, Guilty Gear, Bayonetta, Devil May Cry. These are all games that feature really like character designs that are so clearly informed by kink culture. There's so much androgyny and blurring of gender lines that isn't criticized or presented as a joke. They're just openly what they are. Daisuke Ishiwatari is the person who created Guilty Gear, and he's gone on record as saying that Bridget, a character who's just been introduced back into Strive, who's been a character in Guilty Gear for years, was literally always trans. It is something that he wasn't in a position to be openly communicative about at the time, but had always planned, like intended for that character to be. It's like this young, what at the time was referred to as a boy wearing a dress, but had always been intended to be a young trans woman, and is now able to actually openly be a trans woman. And that's just one of many characters, including Testament, who now goes by they, them, who have always been outwardly queer presenting in their design. Devil May Cry, like, no one's wearing a t-shirt in that game. There's so much leather. There's so much like action, like fight scenes and sex scenes have so much in common. Dance scenes, all of these things can express the same shit about the relationship between the two characters on screen. And I think that things like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, the way that Jean and Bayonetta clash in the first game is so representative of like Bayonetta's journey of self-discovery and Jean's role in that, and her investment in the outcome of that journey. The way that like there's these pulled punches, but they're also matching every blow because they're linked in ways that Bayonetta doesn't understand and Jean does. I could talk about Bayonetta specifically all day, but I'm gonna move ahead to also like deeper themes that draw me as a queer person to horror are the ways in which horror enables the storyteller to explore themes of identity, the body, the soul, the kind of like links in between those things, and like also obviously like oppression, repression.
Right.
I think of like Alessa, the kind of like a key figure in the lore of Silent Hill is this young girl who like her identity and who she is and her struggle to just like eke out a peaceful life is something that I think anybody struggling with their identity could relate to, especially since like the suffering that was imposed upon her came about as a direct result of religious mania. I love any like, and also looping back into what like you were describing, like your link to horror and your entree into like horror being like the religion and the occult. I love horror that represents religious mania as the symptom of mental illness that it is. Also themes of mental illness. It's all tied together, and like that's kind of, I guess, my answer to that.
It's a freedom of self against oppressive forces without the fatalism. Like there's a lot of draw as a queer person to saying, no, fuck you, I am going to survive this, and getting the happy ending. Not every horror game has that, obviously, and like there are places for, you know, characters to fail, but like largely I think that is the draw for me. Absolutely.
I just saw that Jalen said brisket for Bidget, and that I that just made me smile inside. Bayonetta and Jean are gay aunties. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, if you watch the way that Bayonetta 2 begins and tell me that they aren't a couple. It's Sailor Moon all over again with those two characters that are just really good friends. Sure.
How about you, Lyrica?
I think mine stems back for the idea that we can, you know, trace queerness and horror back all the way to the very roots of horror. And for anybody that says that it hasn't been around, I'm telling you, it has. It has. It has. Nosferatu came out in 1922. That director was an openly gay man. And you can see the way that queerness is allowed to, like we've mentioned before, so free and so open within this genre of horror. From body expression even down to, you can see signs like, again, another old movie, Frankenstein, in the original Frankenstein. And in Bride of Frankenstein, you're talking about, like, for instance, the Bride of Frankenstein. She was created, her very creation was in this effort to please Frankenstein in this very, like, challenging these very normative ways of existing and being able to express some of those fears, especially back then, about being queer in a storytelling way through these horror things. And like a lot of people don't dig deeper and see the deeper meanings of that, but they're questioning these things in society that, you know, and queer related fears. in these films, and then later on that breaks into gaming as well. And I think it's just amazing because it's a genre that allows queerness to be anything that it wants within that scope, whether that be the hero, whether that be the anti-hero, all of those things. You can just exist without that note of being questioned. And I think that's wonderful.
When you reject,
it's paved a lot of ways.
Absolutely. I think it's the kind of the strength of horror is that it rejects notions of mass appeal, which creates distance between the people that are drawn to it and normies. And when you have space from normies, you've secured a refuge for outsiders like us. And I think that's one of the things that I love about horror is that like most people just will never get into it. And so horror can keep out. I should expand this statement, not just to horror, but outsider art in general has a way of just kind of like being almost defiantly niche, which makes it a refuge for society's outcasts, I think.
Yeah, I'm a monster fucker. What of it?
Yeah. Exactly. One of the first vampire stories is extremely gay. Carmilla, right? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You said Carmilla. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or the old Dark House, which was, I think, like a 1930s film. That is the film that directly inspired Rocky Horror Picture Show. I mean, it's amazing. There was another one I don't remember. There was a scene where this man, like, it is almost a literal depiction of being closeted within a heteronormative like kind of household where he literally gets locked inside of a closet, literally, and busts out of the closet and burns the fucking house down. I'm like,
that's so good.
So good.
Yeah. And just in a fit of metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea with like Frankenstein and the bride, just compulsory heterosexuality, but make it spooky. I love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Exactly like Carrie. That was my first thought.
It's so good. The Haunting of Hill House is a really good TV show that is based on a book that also has some very significant queer undertones between like two of the women in that house. So it's very good. You can't dive into the horror genre without experiencing some kind of queer response. Like it's been there from the beginning.
Yep. And if you can't find it, you're not looking hard enough.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Who's the person who made Hellraiser?
Clive Barker. Yep. Openly gay man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Inspired by leather daddy and punk culture. Like, you can't be upset that the new Pinhead is played by a trans woman. Like, get over yourself.
You're not welcome here. You've misunderstood where you found yourself. Leave immediately.
Like The Craft, Nancy, hello.
I need to subject that movie to my partner. They won't view it as a subjection. I'm sure they'll love it.
Let the right one in. Like, I can keep going.
Damn, yeah. The original. Have you seen the original?
Oh yeah.
It's
that was
so
my
good.
first. Yeah. They've redone it. I think they're redoing it again. I think they're making it into a TV series. I just love the original so much. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love that movie. Again, I just in general, I would love to see less remakes. More original content, please. Which is why I'm definitely more interested in Silent Hill F, as opposed to the Silent Hill 2 remake, which I've my views have softened on. But I'm definitely just like, I would love to see something new being done. The originals really stand on their own. I don't really know what there is to improve on beyond like satisfying people's need to see expensive graphics, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It looks nice.
If we're talking about horror being ingenuitive, like on a mechanical aspect, like for sure, like Resident Evil 4, not to like keep going back to it, but please, popularized that over the shoulder third person perspective that would become the norm in all third-person shooters. Like, you can't play Gears of War, you can't play Mass Effect, you can't play Dead Space without Resident Evil 4. And Dead Space, set a new bar on immersive UIs. Like, just that glowing little symbol of health on Isaac's back was such a game changer for that conversation of, well, what is an immersive video game? Like, do we want to have obtrusive features like a UI, or does that contribute to the game and the narrative itself? Like,
oh god, yeah, UIs are something that, like, I think the most boring opinion on UIs, or prevailing philosophy on UIs that has kind of taken over, is the idea that UIs are across the board intrusive, and a lot of games, particularly ones that purport to be atmosphere first, will try to have as minimal UI as possible. I'm of the mind that as long as the UI is aesthetically of a piece with the other visual aspects of the game, there is nothing immersion destroying about a UI, because UIs are endemic to the medium of video games. And if you can't be immersed while playing a video game if there's a UI in the way, then maybe watch a movie, I guess. Like, I say that as somebody who loves Silent Hill, and that game has pretty much no UI outside of the pause screen. Like, I just tried Fatal Frame. I just started Fatal Frame a little bit ago, and that game is a video game. There's points. There's like, you take a picture at the right time, and the video game gets all video game on you and goes like shutter chance, and like it's so UI heavy, and yet I am still so fully immersed in the tone and the atmosphere of that game. The UI becomes part of it because I've sat down to play a video game. It's okay. And I think
there's
that,
a point system involved with your pictures, like literally.
Yeah, it's so cool. And it's still so atmospheric and scary. Mm-hmm. Video games do not have to replicate movies to be respected as an art form. I like when there's this quote from a YouTube video that I love, where the person, the YouTuber, says something to the effect of like, film validating video games as an art form because the industry is too cowardly to wave a flag of its own. And that's so true when I think about how, like, fair weather video game players, people who maybe have either a minimal or little to no history with video games are mainstream now, so everyone is taking interest, which is great, except when, instead of going through the kind of gate and then delving deeper and deeper as time goes on, if you just kind of linger at the entrance, only playing the examples of games that kind of like have the most like publicity and like are like the largest, most like commercially like represented pieces of work. I'm trying to figure out a way to preface this.
I do not vibe with I've taken damage, so the screen is turning red and everything is getting echoey. Like, give me a health bar that looks like a sword and tells me exactly how many hits I can take.
It's okay. It's
Look,
okay.
I'm just gonna say it, and this may be, you may never see me on the internet again. I don't know, but I'm just gonna say it. Didn't we learn from games like Heavy Rain? Haven't we been through enough?
Oh my god, yeah. It's okay for games to feel like games. They don't have to be movies for you to respect them.
You know what happens when we have games with no UIs? We have stuff like, oh, maybe I should stand up now. And maybe I should brush my teeth. I'm sorry if there's Heavy Rain lovers out there.
Oh my god. Yeah.
I'm not
Would
sorry.
You like
it's
to set this
bad.
plate down? Can you solve this controller's riddle?
I fucking hate David Cage, though. So
yeah, that guy's a hack. That guy's an absolute windbag. And I said earlier that critique is not attack. I'm attacking you, David.
I changed my mind. This is an attack.
This isn't a full-on assault on Monsieur Cage.
Call out post at David Cage.
You're a fake artist.
We're gonna,
I do not fuck with the work of Cage, especially his fucking like extremely like neoliberal like just tin-eared take on like civil rights with what is it called? Too Human? No, that's like an Xbox 360 launch title.
Detroit Become
Detroit yes,
Become
that's
Human.
the one.
Become Human.
That
it's
name,
not.
God.
Whack. Sorry.
Real bad.
It's just like, do you get it? Do you know who he's quoting? I'll spell it out for you.
Jeez.
And it's not even asking a question like, do you understand the implications of this? It's like, do you think I'm smart? Like, am I doing a good job with your video game? It's like, no, David, it's okay.
You can
and it's
stop
also
now.
God, it's also toothless because it's like, instead of actually like ruminating on the existence of like androids in the world, it's more like, what if androids were are largely light-skinned white people, for like just to note, we're a stand-in for Black and brown people. Like,
right.
It's like, what if I pick a softer target to make my extremely softball take?
They won't notice.
Just no risk. Just coward shit. Not into it.
God. I'm so grateful for that tangent. Is there anything we talked a little bit about the upcoming Silent Hill games? Is there anything else that y'all are particularly excited about in the near future with horror? Either titles or mechanics, like Resident Evil Village is supposed to get a VR update, I believe, pretty soon.
I gotta play 7. I really need to I need to actually play I almost feel like I want to play the older Resident Evil games so that I can better appreciate how the series has evolved over time. Because I truly have played essentially none of them. I plan on starting with the first Resident Evil remake that came out for the GameCube. And then I'm going to probably try and procure a copy of the PS1 Resident Evil 2, 3. Maybe skip some of the ones that people view as non-essential or bad. Although I kind of like to make up my own mind about
I don't know.
that.
I love 6. Like, everybody dunks on 6, but I love the co-op features in that one, and I love how over the top it is. Like,
why is it that people dunk on it?
It is the turn towards action. When the demo came out, there was a lot of backlash about the mechanics of it specifically because the camera was kind of at a weird angle. But I mean, Resident Evil 6, and people thought it was bloated because there are 4 campaigns that you can play as with 2 characters each. So like, there's a lot of content within 6. But it is mainly just that there are too many explosions and everyone is
again, like what did you think you've been playing if like that bothers you about Resident Evil? Like, hasn't that been a feature of that series since its inception?
Resident Evil 6 is the closest that we have gotten to a Dino Crisis remake because the bad guy turns into a fucking T-Rex.
Are you kidding me?
God,
that owns. I kind of got to play that now. I felt like people were so determined to have a negative opinion on that game that they even groused about the logo. Like, the 6 looks like a giraffe, and I'm mad about that. It's like, you're just addicted to being pissed off, and it's really weird.
Yeah. I love 6. I love even the weird entries in Resident Evil. It is my comfort series for sure.
To that regard, you know the game Dead Aim?
Yeah. I had that one.
That's an amazing OST. So like, I'm a musician, and I have heard more OSTs than I have actually played games. And the OST for Dead Aim is composed by a personal hero of mine, Nobuyoshi Sano. He primarily worked with a lot of his work can be found under Namco's umbrella. Like, he did a lot of music for Tekken and other series. He's amazing. And Resident Evil has an illustrious history of like safe room music, like really relaxing music that plays in the save rooms. And Dead Aims is actually my favorite. It's an uncommon choice for the top save room, I think a lot of people would gravitate towards either RE1 or 4.
Mhm.
Dead Aims is so stark and simplistic, but it has such an oppressive, gloomy atmosphere to it that at once is oppressive and gloomy, but also very relaxing.
Mhm.
Sorry, just random musical moment.
No, it's all good. I love it. I was actually talking to somebody right before we started recording, and they mentioned that like, oh, they love horror games. They love watching Let's Plays of them, and it got me thinking. Like, we owe so much of the popularity of horror now in gamings because of Let's Plays on YouTube and because of streamers on Twitch. Like, there was a resurgence of video games that like started coming out because, you know, Markiplier started getting on it, and we had all these big names who were playing these like weird indie games and like bringing them to light and making more people want to play and want to watch them. I think Let's Plays. What's up?
Did y'all see? There's like this. So RPG Maker's series of games that have given people the tools to create indie games years and years before like indie game culture really started taking off. And there actually were quite a bit of RPG Maker horror games. One of the more popular that was heavily featured during the boom of Let's Players in the early 2010s was a game called Ao Oni, which is a Japanese word for blue goblin or something like that. Blue ogre, I think. And Ao Oni is just like, it's like a pretty straightforward, simplistic game, but it was a game that illustrated the fact that you don't need realistic graphics to get the shit scared out of you. Because that when that motherfucker come on the screen, like, and he's just walking towards you with his big ass head and this like weird, like, it's like music starts playing. Like people just be like, would lose their shit and shriek and like, Let's Play culture, I think it has had a profound impact on horror and has allowed it to, as video games have transformed and become a more mainstream medium, it's allowed horror games to continue to exist in the public eye. Some might say negative effect that Let's Play culture has had is that it has limited what type of horror games will get noticed, because the horror games that tend to get noticed are the ones that facilitate the most shrieking. So games that are more based in atmosphere and storytelling tend to not get featured as much as the games where something very bright and loud and sudden happens frequently, which has left me a little thirsty. It's been a bit of a horror game desert for me. Good horror games do still come out, and even some of the ones that are mostly jump scare based can still be fun, and I enjoy watching the Let's Plays, but I don't play much of them, mostly because of a thing that if I recall correctly, you and I, Faye, have in common, which is I don't scare easy. So games that are primarily based in jump scares are kind of like flat experiences for me. If there's no other meat on the bones than just jump scares. And the impact of Let's Plays is that every horror game after Amnesia has had to replicate the DNA of Amnesia in some way, shape, or form, which has left out things like Fatal Frame and Silent Hill to an extent. And I would love to see that influence, a resurgence of that influence, which I hope to see in Silent Hill F. And would like to see maybe RE explore its own history a little bit more, because like RE7 and 8 very clearly take influence from Amnesia, like every modern horror does. But they iterate on it and are novel in their own right. Like they definitely stand on their own, but the influence is so clear that I personally, I know I'm a deep outlier on this subject, but like I kind of wasn't really excited to play 7 and 8 initially. I've since kind of come around and am excited to finally dive into Resident Evil, like starting from the beginning and working my way up to the modern entries. But yeah, Let's Play culture has had a profound impact. You are definitely right about that.
I also like. Do I enjoy Slender Man from a gameplay or narrative perspective? No.
Let's talk about the 8 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a classic. It's an internet classic.
Not really, but am I grateful for, for that game bringing horror to the forefront of people's minds and like inspiring people to make their own games? And like, yeah, I think it's fucking awesome. Like, go for it.
But I got good memories playing that game. Watching my friends like jump. Just, oh shit.
Okay. Lyrica, how do you convince somebody who is not a horror fan to get into a game?
Oh. You mean besides just being like, sit there for a minute, watch me scream, and then when I die, you jump in. No.
Yeah, I mean, either watching or playing, honestly.
Yeah, I feel like I do have quite a bit of people who are a part of my community or who come in and they enjoy the aspect of watching the horror game, but more so than they would enjoy playing it. I have some members that will watch me play a horror game. They will know full and well that they can't play. They won't be able to play the horror game, but are the same people who will send me random indie horror games to play on stream because they're interested in seeing it, and I love doing that. I just think there's so much within the gamut of horror that if you can tell me a little bit about what you like and a little bit of what scares you within the realm of, this would be wouldn't be too much that you couldn't handle, I feel like I could find something for you, right?
Yeah.
Like there's just so much, even getting into things that are like visual novel type based. I mean, there's such a huge gamut of things, even up to like funny horror, right? Like you wouldn't say something like the Ghostbusters game really is like a horror scare you game, but you're dealing with ghosts. You're literally hunting ghosts and like it's all connected to ancient demons. But it's not going to necessarily scare you, or like playing Killer in DBD isn't necessarily going to scare you the way that playing Survivor will.
Right.
So I do feel like there's kind of, if it's something that you're interested in, there's kind of like there's something that'll fit you within that. We just got to find it.
Oh gosh, yeah. Like, by that same token, things like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, also like Darkstalkers, or any fighting game or outside of the genre of horror, any game that kind of is like deriving its aesthetics so clearly from horror could be an entree into that vibe that might give you that itch to kind of explore what about these visual trappings interest you, and like what other games can kind of bring that vibe. Like, I think like, yeah, it really just depends on like what about horror has kept you out. What are you frightened of encountering, or like worried that, like, what are your limits, I guess? Because there's definitely a piece of horror media that will kind of meet you where you are and never not push you too far.
And that's the great thing about like real horror fans, is that like they won't gatekeep how you consume that content. Like, you want to watch somebody play through The Quarry, like, hell yeah, I'm all for it, because like it's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of safety in watching somebody else play and having that like communal experience. It's like sitting on the couch with your best friend and like enjoying that company.
And getting do that in a way that isn't causing harm to people allows people to stay within that. Like, you can enjoy horror and be comfortable. You can also choose to enjoy horror and be uncomfortable if that's what you're choosing. Whatever it is, we can do that for you. You can be alone in a room with all you have is a freaking lighter that keeps going out, every 2 seconds. And I don't know, you have a demon nun chasing you around, puppet combo. Or you can be spinning the wheel to see which one of the killers you're going to be taking out tonight on the DVD dating sim. It's all horror,
Yes.
I need to get like a heart rate monitor and do a stream where it's like, can this game scare me? I'd like to see.
Those are so much fun.
I feel that Nun Massacre by Puppet Combo can scare anybody.
Okay, I'll have to look into that. Y'all have piqued my curiosity with Puppet Combo's work.
I legitimately, I think Resident Evil Village is this new Rose DLC is the first time that a game has like actively creeped me out because there is a pretty significant portion of the DLC that deals with dolls and mannequins in an extremely well done way. Like I was shitting bricks. Like, and
is that like a particular bugaboo for you?
I was definitely one of those kids that, like, Lyrica, we were talking about Chucky right before this. I saw Chucky at too young of age through a blanket that was not thick enough. And so, you know, I don't really do dolls or puppets or anything like that. But, like, it was really cool getting to play a game that, like, got that ick factor for me. And it was so much fun. It was so good. If you are interested in horror in general, but like are very skittish when it comes to that thing, I would also say like speedruns are the way to go. Like if you've never watched a GDQ horror block, like they'll explain the mechanics, the stories. You'll get like almost the full experience without having to play the game yourself, and it's fast. Like I love speedruns and
short and sweet
horror speedrun.
It's so funny to watch like a horror speedrun, if you know the story, because it's like, oh, this character is like pressing slowly through this like foreboding supernatural town where manifestations of their repressed guilt are like menace them in the shadows. But I'm gonna glitch through this wall real quick. I'm gonna glitch through this wall and like cut 6 hours of in-game content in a single instance. But he's so sad though. But watch me fly through the air.
This is the incarnation.
I'm gonna see you on the other side of the game. Okay.
This is the incarnation of your repressed fears, and we're just gonna take this hammer and just bonk it at the right spot, and it'll clip through the wall. Like it's all good.
Jump 2 times, you'll be on the other side of the nightmare. It's fine.
Oh man, yeah, speedruns are great.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Oh, like it's such a silly ass aside, but just like I think that there is such an intersection of queerness and neurodivergence in speedrun culture and fighting game culture. Just like anything that is like fixative and rewards fixation and rewards digging deep in a way that for a normal person would just be too much. I think like there are genres and cultures, subcultures within the larger culture of video games that like have been a haven for me as a neurodivergent person and as a queer person. Like there's such a massive queer contingent in the FGC. And like we tend to play the weirder ones. Like I think games like Guilty Gear, what people call air dashers or anime fighters, have been such a refuge. Like any sort of forum where people are talking about Guilty Gear, like Dust Loop or whatever, the majority of the people that I have befriended in those spaces have all been like queer, black and brown, and like Asian people, just to kind of like tie in that like connection between queerness, neurodivergence, and games. Speedruns are a part of that as well. It's like the ultimate fidget spinner because there's just so much to figure out and like fixate on, and the more focus you pour into it, the more the experience actually opens up to you.
For sure. I find the same thing with with horror and wrestling fans, honestly.
Yeah.
Like the two are so intermingled.
Yeah.
What's gayer than wrestling? Like I'm like wrestling is amazing.
That's
you know,
so
what's your flavor of wrestling? What's your flavor of gay? It's the same.
It's there.
And what's your flavor of horror? This Venn diagram, it's a circle.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Do either of y'all have anything else that you wanna bring up on this conversation of video game horror or just horror in general and queerness?
I need more survival horror. Like I am sitting here begging for Sons of the Forest to come out. That is what scares me. Make me have to fight for my survival, build something out in the middle of nowhere, find food, and also fight off scary ass zombies. Yes. I also need more religious trauma horror, please. Both of those things. and I can die happy. I'm both terrified and excited for what VR horror is going to eventually become as it gains more capabilities to be able to, be fully fledged out long games. Yeah, I'm excited and terrified for all of those things. Horror is great. You should try it.
Absolutely. So I guess for me, the thing that always pulls me in is when I feel like there is a deeply personal component to the game, either expressed through the mechanics or explicitly in the story. There is an indie game creator who's no longer with us, from Japan, who went by the handle Parun, who made 2 games that are more influential in the indie horror space than most people know. And they really should know. These things are special. He made a game called Heisei Pistol Show, and another game called Kinder, which he eventually remade, and it's called Rekinder. And these games visit upon some really heavy subject matter, and despite their visual, the art style being their RPG Maker games, they're like kind of pixel based. They look like Super Nintendo games. There are moments that will not sit well with you. Like, it's definitely a game, like, look into it, do your research, stay safe. It visits some pretty heavy subject matter, but it also visits topics that interest me, like the body, identity, repression, gender, queerness, all of these things, mental illness. Truly beautiful and singular work. The thing that I would like to see more of are, I think we've had enough horror games that can be effectively boiled down to hide from daddy. I think there are a lot like Amnesia, most indie horror games. At the end of the day, the core conceit on a pure experience level is better hide. Stop doing, don't do shit. Better hide, and it's gripping. It is such an efficient way of eliciting tension from the player. Mm-hmm. But if that is all the game, I think we've reached almost like a boiling point, or rather a point of total saturation with games that offer only that. And I would like to see some things that we have sort of abandoned by this point maybe be revisited by creative, independent game designers. Things like fixed camera angles, tank controls. Tank controls are something that are very it's very contentious because people view them as overly complicated. I would urge you to give them the chance, because when up and down on your controller when the controls are no longer camera relative, that liberates the camera and allows for talking about video games and movies. When you liberate the camera from having the controls be linked to them, that allows you to have more expressive camera angles and elicit tension through more creative and artistic camera work. Expressive camera angles that create atmosphere, not just tension, but atmosphere. Like these are things that were so endemic to survival horror in its inception that initially were born of limitations, but in retrospective become features that to me now feel kind of like underutilized, forgotten. And I would love to see a return of that, a visitation of that, and a return to survival horror that's less focused in hiding and being frightened of being attacked, and more about just atmosphere, brooding atmosphere, exploration, learning about a space, and just the intimacy that experience kind of elicits.
There are so many cool TikToks that I will see from indie developers who are diving into horror and pushing the bounds on like what it means to make a horror game, both in terms of like mechanics and stories. I need to be better about like saving those. That way I can actually like support these folks once their game comes out, because like I'll look at it and be like, oh, this is like right up my alley, and then I'll completely forget about it because I hop from one thing to the next. Yeah. Also, if you ever need a resource to provide like comprehensive content warnings or trigger warnings, Does the Dog Die? Fantastic website.
Yep,
Like,
that's what we use.
it expands the gamut from games, movies, TV shows, pretty much everything you can think of. So it's a lifesaver, especially if you are streaming this stuff and you want to be cognizant of your viewers.
Yeah.
I would like I would like it if the developers of Little Nightmares could create a game that like kept the same aesthetic, same mechanics, but like actually worked and didn't frustrate me to the point where I wanted to like smash my head against a wall because I keep like missing the same jump over and over again. If we could just like tighten up that, I'd be set.
Love it.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. Thank you both for being on the show, and thank you to everybody who's participated in Ghouls for Charity this year. Like, it's been, less fat phobia and Little Nightmares, and ableism in general. Like,
oh my god,
we didn't even get into like using disfigurement as a key basis for your villains, but it's real gross.
I got beef with that.
Yeah, y'all. You can be scary and not be an asshole at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been great. I love horror and I love video games and I love all things queer. So y'all are fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a great time.
Do y'all have anything to plug before we wrap up?
I'm gonna try to start streaming often again. I've been taking a bit of a break from streaming regularly, just due to the old Mentos health getting in the way. But I had these like aspirations of like churning through all of these like games that carry a lot of these themes that draw me to horror throughout October. That month has passed and I've only started one. So Halloween ends when I fucking say so. I'm going to continue playing those games.
It's Horrormas.
Yeah. God damn it.
I mean, honestly, if you live that horror lifestyle, it's 365.
Oh, yeah.
I will never stop watching scary movies or playing scary games.
Hell no.
Except for maybe when the next Animal Crossing comes out. But, everything in moderation.
For sure.
Cool. Lyrica, did you have anything to plug?
I'm just me. I'm over at /LookAtLyrica on Twitch and Twitter, and I stream 3 days a week. They're not the same 3 days because that would be imagine having a set schedule. No, I don't. So yeah, I stream 3 days a week. I'll be streaming tomorrow, and for the rest of the days, you'll just have to follow my Twitter to find out because I don't even know. So yeah, that's what we're doing. We'll be playing some Mortuary's Assistant tomorrow. So if you want to see some horror, if you want to see me scream, that'll be tomorrow.
Are you playing that with controller or mouse and keyboard?
I am playing that one with. I think when I first did it with mouse and keyboard. I didn't know that it had controller capability.
I will say mouse and keyboard is like much better because controller is a little obtuse and confusing. But yeah, that game rules. I want to play more of it.
I haven't played it since the new Halloween update, and I know that they added. Like, I was checking out the whole roadmap to that game. There's so much coming, and I'm so excited.
Yeah. I think that will do it for us here today on Arcade Cuties. As you know, we end every show with our signature catchphrase. So, Zenny, what is that catchphrase?
Oh God. I was so caught off guard by that I couldn't even improvise a fake one. It's a living.
That's perfect. Thank you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hey cuties, thanks for listening to our podcast. If you liked this episode of Arcade Cuties, be sure to let us know by leaving a review on iTunes, sharing the show with a friend, and leaving a suggestion for future episodes. Make sure to follow us on our social media to stay up to date with our content. We appreciate all of the love and support. Until next time, bye cuties!